She didn't get fired. Nobody sat her down. Nobody handed her a box. Nobody said the words. There was no meeting with HR, no formal process, no documentation she could point to later and say, "This is where it ended." What happened instead was slower, and in some ways, harder to understand. Her hours got cut, not dramatically, just enough. Then her schedule started shifting to days she'd mentioned were difficult for her. The good assignments started going to someone else without explanation. Her manager stopped including her in the planning conversations she used to be part of. Her requests for clarity got vague responses that never quite answered the question. Nothing was ever said directly. Everything was communicated through the accumulation of small things that individually could be explained away. She held on for 4 months. Then she quit. And the moment she handed in her resignation, she finally understood what had been happening. She hadn't decided to leave. She'd been moved toward the door so gradually, so carefully, that by the time she walked through it, she thought the decision was hers. It wasn't. What happened to her has a name. It's called quiet cutting, and it's one of the most calculated things a company can do to an employee, and one of the least talked about, because it leaves no paper trail. It creates no legal exposure, and it works almost every time. Here's what most employees believe when this starts happening to them. They believe it's temporary, a rough patch, a reorganization that will settle, a manager going through something. They give it time. They try harder. They tell themselves that if they just keep showing up and doing good work, the situation will correct itself. It doesn't correct itself because it isn't a mistake. Quiet cutting is a deliberate strategy. It's what organizations do when they want to reduce headcount without the legal, financial, and reputational cost of a layoff or termination. Severance is expensive. Unemployment claims affect company rates. Wrongful termination suits create liability. But if an employee quits voluntarily, if they make the decision themselves or believe they did, none of those costs apply. So the organization manufactures the conditions under which a reasonable person would quit, and then it waits. The question is whether you see it before you do what they're counting on you to do. Here are the specific signs that what you're experiencing isn't a rough patch, it's a quiet cut. Sign 1. Your responsibilities are shrinking without explanation. Not dramatically, quietly. A project you were running gets reassigned. A meeting you used to attend stops appearing on your calendar. A function that was yours gets absorbed by someone else, framed as streamlining or workload balancing or organizational efficiency. Each change has a reasonable-sounding explanation. The pattern of changes does not. Here's the mechanism. When a company wants you gone, they start removing your organizational footprint before they remove you. They thin out your responsibilities so that when you eventually leave, or when they eventually formalize the exit, the disruption is minimal. They've already redistributed your function. Your departure creates no gap, which means it costs them nothing. When your role starts shrinking, the organization is preparing for your absence. They're just doing it before telling you. Sign 2. Your schedule or conditions are changing in ways that specifically affect you. Shift changes that conflict with your availability. New requirements that don't apply to your colleagues. Policy changes that land disproportionately on your situation. A return to office mandate enforced selectively. Remote work flexibility that gets removed for your role specifically. These changes are rarely announced as being about you. They're framed as organizational decisions, but they're calibrated to create friction in your life that makes staying harder than leaving. Here's what your employer is actually calculating. If we make the conditions uncomfortable enough, if we change the terms of the arrangement in ways that specifically affect this person, they'll decide the job no longer works for them, and that decision will feel like theirs. The discomfort is not incidental, it's the mechanism. Sign 3. You've been excluded from the conversations that determine your future, planning meetings you used to be part of, strategy discussions that now happen without you. Decisions that affect your role being made and communicated to you after the fact rather than with your input. This exclusion does two things simultaneously. It removes your ability to influence outcomes, and it signals to everyone around you, without anyone saying it, that your role in the organization's future is uncertain. Here's what the people in those rooms are thinking when your name doesn't come up on the invite. We don't need their input because their involvement in this is temporary. It's not a status thing, it's a timeline thing. You've been removed from the planning conversations because you're not in the plan. Let me tell you about a man named Derek. Derek was a regional sales manager at a distribution company, 11 years, consistently strong numbers. The kind of employee whose manager called him first when something needed to be done right. In his 11th year, his company brought in a new VP of sales. Within 3 months, Derek noticed the first shift. The weekly sales leadership calls, which he'd been on for 6 years, moved to a time that conflicted with his standing client review. He asked to have it moved back. He was told the new time worked better for the majority of the team. Then 2 of his highest performing accounts were transferred to a colleague without a conversation. He was told it was about geographic optimization. Then his territory got reduced. Then his quarterly targets, which had always been set collaboratively, were handed down without the usual planning discussion. Each thing, individually, had an explanation. Together, they told a story Derek finally let himself read clearly in month 4. He went to HR not to complain, but to ask directly whether his role was being eliminated. The answer was a carefully worded non-answer. No plans had been finalized. The company valued his contribution. His performance was not in question. That answer told him everything. He spent the next 6 weeks quietly building his options, updated his resume, reconnected with his network, had 2 conversations with recruiters he'd kept warm over the years. He accepted an offer before anything was formalized at his current company. He resigned on his terms. He negotiated his exit package from a position of choice rather than desperation. The company had been moving him toward the door. He just made sure he got there first, and on his own conditions. Sign 4. Your manager has stopped investing in you. The feedback has gone quiet. The development conversations have stopped. The check-ins that used to be substantive have become transactional. Status updates, not growth conversations. Your manager used to challenge you. Now they just receive your work. Here's the distinction that matters. A manager who is invested in you pushes back. They ask hard questions. They redirect. They care about the quality of your thinking, not just your output. A manager who knows you're not going to be here much longer stops spending energy on your development. Why invest in someone who isn't in the plan? The silence isn't neglect. It's a decision about where to direct limited management attention. When your manager stops developing you, they've stopped seeing a future with you in it. Sign 5. You feel it, but you can't quite name it. The energy is different. The culture has shifted in a way that's hard to articulate. You used to feel like you were part of something. Now you feel like you're adjacent to it, present but not included, competent but not needed. This feeling, which most people dismiss as paranoia or sensitivity, is almost always accurate. You are picking up on a shift in how you are being treated that is real, even when each individual data point has an innocent explanation. Your nervous system is registering what your conscious mind keeps explaining away. Trust it. Now, here's what to do. And I want to be direct about this because the instinct most people have in this situation is wrong. The instinct is to try harder, to demonstrate value, to make yourself more indispensable, to prove that they need you. Don't. Not because your work doesn't matter, it does, but because trying harder inside a system that has already made a decision about you is a closed loop. The decision wasn't made about your performance. It was made about cost, structure, budget, or politics. More effort doesn't change those inputs. Here's what actually changes your position. First, get clarity before you lose leverage. Request a direct conversation with your manager about your role's future. Ask specific questions. What does my role look like in the next quarter? Am I being considered for the restructuring that's happening? Is my position secure? You may not get honest answers, but the way your manager responds to those questions is information. Evasion, deflection, and vague reassurances tell you what you need to know. Second, start building your exit before you need it. Update your resume now, not when you're desperate. Now. Reach out to your network while you still have a title and a paycheck. Have the recruiter conversations from a position of choice. The window between when quiet cutting starts and when it forces your hand is the most valuable window you have. Use it. Third, understand what you're owed before you leave. Research your severance rights. Understand your unemployment eligibility. Know what benefits you're entitled to and for how long. If you're going to be pushed out, make sure you receive everything you're entitled to, and consider whether a negotiated departure on your terms is available to you. Fourth, document everything. The schedule changes, the reassignments, the exclusions, the conversations that happened verbally and were never followed up in writing. Not to build a lawsuit, necessarily, to build a record that exists outside your memory. If you need to make a claim later or negotiate an exit, documentation is your foundation. She quit without any of that, without leverage, without options built in advance, without a record of what had been done. She walked through the door they had been carefully, quietly moving her toward for 4 months. The company got exactly what they wanted, at exactly no cost. Quiet cutting works because it makes you feel like you made the decision. Because by the time you understand what's happening, you've already started to believe their version of events, that the job stopped working for you, that you chose to move on, that this was your call. It wasn't your call. But what you do next is see it clearly, move deliberately, and get there first.